There comes a time when familiar places stop feeling familiar. The conversations that used to energize you now drain you, and the habits that shaped your days suddenly feel too small for who you're becoming. The people who used to feel like home now leave you exhausted after a single conversation, and those dreams you believed would define your life suddenly feel distant, almost like they were created by a version of you that no longer exists. If any of this feels familiar, you're not falling apart, you're unfolding. What feels like confusion is actually clarity beginning to rise from underneath everything you outgrew. Your soul isn't lost, it's finally waking up to what has always been true. Most people misinterpret this stage as burnout or emotional collapse. They panic when their old passions stop feeling alive. They try to force themselves back into habits that once brought comfort, fearing that letting go means erasing their identity. But something much deeper is happening. You're not building a new self from scratch. You're remembering the self buried beneath years of expectations, survival instincts, and versions of yourself you created to fit into spaces that were never meant for your full presence. This isn't reinvention, it's revelation. This shift begins quietly, like a subtle inner realignment. It's the moment when your internal rhythm starts matching your truth instead of your conditioning. And that shift always comes with a symbolic death, the death of the persona you crafted to stay safe. The person you used to be was designed to survive, not thrive. Every behavior, every relationship, every dream was constructed around avoiding threat, avoiding disappointment, avoiding being too much. You taught yourself to laugh at things that weren't funny, to endure conversations that drained you, to pursue goals that impressed others but left you empty. You learned to dim yourself just enough to remain accepted. You became fluent in shrinking, expressive but not intimidating, confident but not unapologetic. But survival mode has an expiration date, and when it hits, everything you once clung to begins to feel suffocating. The mask becomes unbearable. The performance becomes exhausting. The old identity feels like a costume you've outgrown. This is when the losing interest begins. Not because you're broken, but because you're breaking open. It starts in small, almost invisible ways. The friend who thrives on chaos, who once made you feel needed, now drains you. The job you took for stability suddenly feels like confinement. Your routines morph from anchors into restraints. Superficial conversations become intolerable. Small talk feels like sandpaper on your soul. You begin craving depth, not as a preference, but as a necessity. When others can't meet you there, you lose the urge to carry the connection alone. External validation fades in value. Compliments that once lit you up now bounce off. Approval from people who don't understand your spirit becomes irrelevant. Your old emotional defenses stop working. The distractions you used to rely on no longer numb anything. The habits you used to escape yourself suddenly feel empty. You find yourself facing emotions you've been avoiding for years, not because you're ready, but because avoidance no longer functions. Most people get terrified here. They confuse this shift with failure. They assume losing interest means losing themselves. But the truth is the opposite. You're not losing yourself, you're losing the idea of yourself you constructed to survive. The old you needed certainty. The old you worshipped control. The old you believed happiness came from perfect circumstances. The old you thought love had to be earned through pleasing, performing, proving. But as that version fades, something new begins to rise. A you who is curious instead of fearful. A you who finds comfort in solitude rather than distraction. A you who speaks honestly even when it disrupts expectations. A you who sets boundaries even if it disappoints others. A you who chooses authenticity even if it costs relationships that depended on your silence. This emerging self doesn't chase validation because it recognizes its own value. It doesn't cling to outcomes because it trusts the unfolding. It doesn't bend endlessly for others because it finally understands the cost of abandoning oneself. And then the shift accelerates. One day you realize you haven't checked social media in half a day. You stop over-explaining your choices to people who don't resonate with your path. You say no without a long apology.
You pick peace over chaos, stillness over noise, quality over quantity. People around you will notice. Some will admire it, others will resist it. Your growth will challenge their comfort. Your transformation will disrupt the version of you they depended on, the accommodating you, the predictable you, the you who didn't take up too much space. When you stop playing that old role, they'll be forced to face their own stagnation. That's when you'll realize many relationships weren't built on love. They were built on convenience, on what you provided, on how small you stayed. And as you pull away from those dynamics, you may feel grief. Grief for friendships that can't meet you where you're going. Grief for old dreams that no longer spark anything inside you. Grief for old goals that once defined you but no longer belong to you. That grief is sacred. It is the mourning of an identity that protected you but no longer fits the life calling you. But on the other side of that grief is a self you've never met before. A self that no merely survives reality but shapes it. A self that transforms hardship into wisdom. A self that notices the quiet miracles embedded in ordinary moments. You'll start witnessing synchronicities everywhere, aligned conversations, perfectly timed opportunities, messages that feel tailor-made for your next step. These aren't coincidences. This is what happens when you stop fighting your natural direction and begin flowing with it. As you lose interest in the noise of your old life, you become available to hear the whispers of your new one. Your energy becomes sacred. You stop scattering it carelessly. You protect your space with intention, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. You finally learn the difference between supporting others and sacrificing yourself. The old you equated being needed with being loved. You were the fixer, the listener, the emotional anchor for everyone else. But now, when someone calls only to unload, you feel a pause inside, not rejection, but awareness. You start recognizing one-sided relationships. You see manipulation for what it is. You feel the drain of interactions that once felt normal. And that clarity doesn't make you cold, it makes you conscious. You stop bending yourself to avoid disappointing others. You stop twisting into shapes that hurt you. You stop saying yes when your entire being aches for no. Because you finally understand that disappointing people who benefit from your lack of boundaries is not selfish, it's liberation. Your standards shift in ways even you didn't expect. What you once tolerated now feels impossible to accept. What you once impressed you now feels shallow. This isn't you becoming picky, it's you aligning with your actual needs. You stop numbing. You stop consuming mindlessly. You stop drowning your intuition in noise. Instead, you crave silence, the real kind, the silence where you finally hear yourself, the silence where your inner world becomes louder than the outer one. You start noticing details you never saw before, the way the light sits on your furniture in the morning, the sound of your own breathing, the feeling of being fully present. You read things that challenge your mind. You choose experiences that nourish your soul. For the first time, contentment comes from within rather than chasing something outside. Your relationship with time shifts too. You stop rushing towards a future that never arrives. You stop living life like a checklist. You start existing in the moment, really existing. You taste your coffee. You listen to your conversations. You feel your life instead of planning it. And solitude, it becomes a sanctuary instead of a threat. You begin enjoying your own company in a way the old you never knew was possible. This changes everything. You stop looking for validation from people who aren't aligned with you. You stop apologizing for your existence. You stop shrinking because others are intimidated by your expansion. And yes, some people will try to pull you back. They'll call you selfish, dramatic, distant. They'll try to guilt you back into your old patterns. But that isn't love, that's fear. Your evolution asks them to evolve too, and not everyone is ready. But the most powerful truth you'll learn is this: other people's discomfort with your growth is not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is honoring the self that is emerging, even when it means letting go of what once felt familiar. Because what feels like loss is actually rebirth. You're not becoming someone new, you're finally becoming someone true. someone who chooses depth over illusion, presence over performance, authenticity over approval. This isn't a sudden transformation. It's a slow, gentle remembering, a returning, a homecoming. Some days you'll feel aligned, other days you'll slip into the old patterns. That's not regression, that's integration. Be patient with yourself. You're shedding years of conditioning. You're learning how to live, not just survive. So if something inside you recognizes itself in these words, consider this your confirmation. The restlessness you feel isn't a sign something is wrong, it's the signal that you're finally ready. Ready to stop searching for yourself out there, ready to return to the self within, ready to let the old fall away so the new can unfold. Your transformation isn't coming someday, it's happening right now.